Maya Reynolds stood by the window of her apartment, watching the sun set over the small Midwestern town she now called home. The golden light washed over the main street, giving the brick buildings a warm glow that belied the coldness of her mission. She took a sip of her coffee, her third cup of the day, and turned back to the files spread across her kitchen table. 3 days ago, she had been sitting in a sterile briefing room at CIA headquarters in Langley, Virginia. Now she was Agent 8734, deep undercover in a town most Americans couldn't find on a map. "This is no ordinary assignment," Deputy Director Phillips had told her, sliding a folder across the polished table. His face had been grave, the lines around his eyes deeper than usual. "We have credible intelligence about a domestic terrorism cell operating in Riverdale. They've been flying under the radar for months, but recent chatter suggests they're planning something big." Maya had opened the folder, scanning the sparse information. A handful of suspects, grainy surveillance photos, and a timeline of suspicious activities. Nothing concrete, but enough smoke to suggest a fire. "Why me?" she had asked, though she already knew the answer. "You're our best undercover operative, Reynolds. Your record in Bangkok and Bogota speaks for itself. Plus, you have the background to blend in seamlessly." Phillips hadn't mentioned her race directly, but they both knew what he meant. In a predominantly white town with a history of racial tension, sending in a black female agent was a calculated risk. But Maya's ability to adapt to become whoever she needed to be made her the perfect choice. "What's my cover?" she had asked, already mentally preparing herself for yet another identity. "High school teacher. English literature." The local school had a last-minute opening when their previous teacher unexpectedly moved away. Phillips slid another document across the table. "Your credentials and background story are all here. Apartment's been arranged, car too. Everything you need to establish yourself." Now, as Maya organized her notes in her new apartment, she thought about how quickly life could change. Last week, she had been planning a rare vacation, a chance to visit her aging grandmother in Georgia. Instead, she was here, in a town where Confederate flags still hung in some windows, and where she had already noticed people watching her a little too closely at the local grocery store. The mission parameters were clear. Identify members of the cell, gather evidence of their plans, and help coordinate their takedown before they could execute whatever attack they were planning. Simple in theory, infinitely complex in practice. Maya pinned a map to her wall marking locations of interest. The abandoned warehouse where suspicious late-night gatherings had been reported. The gun shop owned by a former military man with known extremist views. The diner where the suspects supposedly met every Thursday. Small pieces of a puzzle she was determined to solve. Her phone buzzed. A text from her handler, Agent Diaz. "Check in tomorrow." Phone 900, standard protocol. Maya typed a quick acknowledgement and returned to her work. Standard protocol meant a call from a burner phone, no longer than 3 minutes, using their established code phrases. Just enough to confirm she was alive and not compromised. The apartment felt hollow, devoid of personality. That was intentional. Maya Reynolds didn't live here. Maya Davis did, the quiet, bookish teacher who had moved to town for a fresh start after a bad breakup. A woman who kept to herself, but was friendly enough when approached. A woman no one would look at twice or remember in detail. She unpacked her suitcase, hanging up the conservative clothing that would help her blend in at the local high school. Sensible blouses, knee-length skirts, comfortable shoes. Nothing flashy, nothing memorable. The opposite of her real wardrobe back home, filled with vibrant colors and bold patterns that reflected her actual personality. As she hung the last blouse, she caught sight of herself in the mirror. Already she looked different. Her normally curly hair was straightened and pulled back into a tight bun. Her makeup was minimal, designed to make her features less striking. Even her posture was different, slightly hunched, as if trying to take up less space in the world. "Hello, Ms. Davis," she said to her reflection, testing out the voice she'd use for the duration of her stay, softer than her normal tone, with a slight Midwestern accent she'd perfected during previous assignments. The next morning, Maya woke before dawn. Old habits from military training before she joined the CIA. She went through her workout routine quietly, mindful of the neighbors below. Push-ups, sit-ups, and silent yoga to keep her body sharp. In her line of work, physical fitness could mean the difference between life and death. After a quick shower, she dressed for her first day at Riverdale High School. Conservative black pants, a blue blouse, and a cardigan that made her look older than her 34 years. She applied minimal makeup and checked her appearance one last time. "Remember, you're just a teacher," she reminded herself. "Nothing special, nothing threatening." She gathered the lesson plan she'd spent half the night preparing. American literature, with a focus on Hemingway this week. She'd actually majored in English before being recruited by the CIA, making this particular cover identity feel almost like an alternate version of her life. At precisely 8:15, she left her apartment, locking the 3 separate locks she'd installed the night before. Paranoia kept agents alive in the field. The school was a 10-minute drive from her apartment, a brick building that looked like it hadn't been updated since the 1970s. As she parked her nondescript sedan in the teacher's lot, she took a deep breath, centering herself in her new identity. The principal, a tall man with a booming voice named Dr. Wilson, met her at the front office. "Miss Davis, so glad you could join us on such short notice. The kids are eager to meet you." Maya smiled, the practiced, warm smile of Maya Davis. "I'm happy to be here, Dr. Wilson. I've always loved small towns." "Well, we're glad to have you. Not many teachers willing to relocate mid-semester." He led her through the hallways, pointing out important locations. "Teacher's lounge is there, cafeteria down that hall. Your classroom is 114 just around this corner." As they walked, Maya observed everything. The security cameras, the exit points, the flow of people, always analyzing, always preparing for contingencies. It was second nature after 12 years in the field. "Here we are," Dr. Wilson announced, stopping at a classroom door. "Your first class starts in 15 minutes. Any questions before I leave you to it?" Maya shook her head. "I think I've got everything I need. Thank you for the warm welcome." As Dr. Wilson walked away, Maya stepped into her classroom. 30 desks arranged in neat rows, a whiteboard covered in the previous teacher's handwriting, a desk that would be hers for the coming weeks or months. She set down her bag and began arranging her materials. This classroom would be her primary cover, but also her base of operations. Every student could be connected to her targets. Every colleague could provide valuable information. In a town this small, everyone knew everyone else's business. Maya wrote Ms. Davis on the whiteboard in neat, rounded letters, nothing like her usual sharp handwriting. Then she pulled out the class roster, memorizing names and noting which students might be children of her suspects. The first bell rang, and students began filing in, eyeing her curiously. She noted their reactions, some openly staring, others deliberately avoiding eye contact. In a town with minimal diversity, she stood out whether she wanted to or not. "Good morning," she said as the final bell rang. "I'm Ms. Davis, your new English teacher." As she began her introduction, part of her mind remained focused on her true purpose. Somewhere in this town, people were planning violence. Her job was to stop them, all while teaching teenagers about Ernest Hemingway and maintaining a cover that could withstand scrutiny. That evening, after surviving her first day of teaching, Maya drove around town, familiarizing herself with the layout. She passed by the locations she'd marked on her map, taking mental notes about security cameras, regular visitors, and potential observation points. At the local diner, a retro-style establishment called Mel's, she stopped for dinner, choosing a booth with a view of the entire restaurant. According to her briefing, 3 of her suspects regularly ate here. "What can I get you, honey?" asked the waitress, an older woman with bottle blonde hair and a name tag reading Patty. "Just a burger and coffee, please," Maya replied, using her teacher voice. Then, with carefully calculated friendliness, she added, "I'm new in town. Just started at the high school." Patty's face lit up with interest. "Oh, you're the new English teacher. My niece Lisa is in your 4th period class. She said you seemed real nice." Maya smiled, knowing she'd just opened a valuable channel of local information. "That's sweet of her. Everyone's been so welcoming." "Well, not everyone around here is good with newcomers," Patty said, lowering her voice. "But don't you worry about that. Most folks are decent." As Patty walked away, Maya noted the warning in her words, the subtle acknowledgement of the town's racial divisions. It confirmed what her briefing had indicated. Beneath the surface of small-town hospitality lay currents of tension and prejudice. She ate slowly, observing the other patrons while appearing to read a paperback she'd brought. 2 men at the counter matched photos from her briefing, Thomas Reed and William Foster, both former military, both with ties to extremist groups. They weren't doing anything suspicious, just eating pie and drinking coffee. But their presence confirmed the intelligence was accurate. Maya finished her meal, left a generous tip, and headed back to her apartment. She had a check-in call with Agent Diaz in 20 minutes, and she needed to secure her location first. As she drove, she reflected on how quickly she'd slipped into this new life. It wasn't her first deep cover operation, and it wouldn't be her last. But something about this assignment felt different. The danger wasn't from foreign operatives or international criminals. It was from Americans who saw her as an enemy simply because of her skin color. Back in her apartment, she swept for bugs, a daily ritual even though she knew it was unlikely anyone had broken in. Satisfied with her security, she prepared for her call, organizing her observations and questions. Tomorrow would bring her closer to the heart of her mission. A staff meeting where she might meet more people connected to her targets. Community outreach at the local library where several suspects volunteered. Each interaction bringing her deeper into the web of Riverdale's secrets. As darkness fell over the small town, Maya Reynolds, agent, teacher, infiltrator, prepared for the long game ahead. She didn't know yet how dangerous this mission would become, or how her identity as both a CIA operative and a black woman would soon collide in ways that would test every skill she possessed. 3 weeks into her assignment, Maya had established a solid routine. By day, she taught literature to distracted teenagers. By night, she carefully built her intelligence network, mapping connections between suspects and tracking their movements. Her apartment walls now held an intricate web of photos, notes, and red string, all hidden behind a false panel in her closet when she wasn't working. Tonight had been particularly productive. After weeks of patience, she'd finally managed to place a listening device near the back booth of Mel's diner, where her primary suspects met. The tiny device, disguised as a piece of chewing gum stuck under the table, would capture their Thursday night conversations. It wasn't admissible in court, but it would give her the intelligence she needed to direct the investigation. The clock on her dashboard read 11:42 p.m. as she drove back from her surveillance operation. The streets of Riverdale were nearly empty. Most businesses closed hours ago. Maya kept precisely at the speed limit, her headlights cutting through the darkness of the rural road that led to her apartment complex on the edge of town. In her rearview mirror, headlights appeared, growing larger as a vehicle approached from behind. Maya noted the car's speed, too fast for these winding roads, but didn't think much of it until the red and blue lights suddenly flashed on. A police cruiser. Maya checked her speedometer again, exactly 35 mph in a 35 zone. Her tail lights were working. She hadn't swerved or given any reason to be pulled over. Still, she followed procedure, signaling and pulling onto the shoulder. Her mind raced through possibilities. Had her cover been blown? Was this related to her mission? Or was it something else entirely? She took a deep breath, slipping fully into her cover identity. Just a school teacher, heading home after visiting a friend. Nothing suspicious. She rolled down her window and placed both hands on the steering wheel where they would be visible. Standard procedure when interacting with law enforcement. A briefing all agents received, but one that carried extra weight for agents of color. Instead of approaching her window, both officers emerged from their vehicle with hands on their weapons. Maya's instincts sharpened, adrenaline beginning to flow. This wasn't a routine traffic stop. Step out of the vehicle with your hands up. The officer on the driver's side shouted, his voice tight with tension. Maya called out, "May I ask why I'm being stopped, officer?" Her voice was calm, measured exactly as she'd been trained. "I said get out of the car now." The officer had drawn his weapon now, pointing it at her. Maya complied slowly, making every movement deliberate and telegraphed. "I'm opening my door now," she narrated, remembering her training. "I'm stepping out with my hands raised." The cool night air hit her face as she emerged from the car. The officers' flashlights blinded her, making it difficult to see their faces or badge numbers. "Turn around and put your hands on the vehicle," the second officer ordered. He was younger, his voice betraying his nervousness. Always more dangerous, a nervous officer with a drawn weapon. "I'd like to know why I'm being detained," Maya said firmly, still complying with their orders. She turned and placed her palms flat on the roof of her sedan. "We got a report of a suspicious vehicle matching this description," said the first officer, approaching her from behind. "Where are you coming from at this hour?" I was visiting a friend after work. I'm a teacher at Riverdale High, Maya replied, the lie smooth and practiced. The officer's response was a harsh laugh. Right. And I'm the president. He was closer now, close enough that she could smell the coffee on his breath. What's a teacher doing out this late? And on this road? I live in the Valley View apartments just 2 miles ahead, Maya answered truthfully. This is the direct route home. Got any ID on you? The second officer asked, still pointing his flashlight directly into her eyes. My purse is on the passenger seat. My license is in my wallet, Maya said. May I reach for it? Don't move, the first officer ordered. He stepped closer, unnecessarily rough as he began to pat her down. His hands lingered too long on her body, a clear intimidation tactic. We'll get it. The second officer approached the passenger side and shined his light inside before opening the door. What's that bag in the back seat? Just my work bag. It has student papers and books, Maya answered, her mind calculating rapidly. Nothing in the car would break her cover, but their aggressive behavior was escalating the situation. You've got a lot of stuff in here for a simple drive home, the first officer commented, his tone accusatory. Mind telling me what you're really doing out here? Maya repeated her story calmly. I'm a teacher heading home after visiting a friend. I've done nothing wrong, officer. We'll be the judge of that, he replied. People like you don't typically have business in this part of town. The phrase hung in the air, its meaning unmistakable. People like you. Maya felt a familiar knot in her stomach, one she'd experienced many times before. Long before she became a CIA agent. Back when she was just a young woman navigating a world that often judged her by her skin color, before anything else. The second officer emerged from the passenger side with her wallet. Driver's license says Maya Davis, he reported, flipping through her other cards. That's correct, she confirmed. Stand up straight and put your hands behind your back, the first officer ordered suddenly. Am I under arrest? Maya asked, her voice steady despite the growing tension. What's the charge? You're being detained while we investigate, he replied, already reaching for his handcuffs. Stop asking questions and do as you're told. Maya knew her rights, both as a citizen and as a federal agent, but she also knew that asserting them might only escalate the situation. Her mission took precedence. If these officers were simply racially profiling her, the safest play was to comply now and address the violation later. The cold metal of handcuffs clicked around her wrists, tighter than necessary. The officer gave them an extra twist, causing her to wince involuntarily. Not so comfortable now, are we? He murmured, just loud enough for her to hear. Then louder. Let's have a look in that trunk. The second officer popped her trunk while the first moved her toward the police cruiser. Maya glanced back, watching as they rifled through her carefully curated teacher belongings. A stack of graded essays, textbooks, a gym bag with workout clothes. Nothing suspicious, sit, the first officer ordered, pushing her down onto the back seat of the police cruiser. The door slammed, leaving her handcuffed in the cage. Through the window, Maya watched as the officers thoroughly searched her vehicle. The younger one held up her phone, examining it before placing it in an evidence bag. The older one was pulling out the contents of her glove compartment, tossing vehicle registration and insurance documents onto the passenger seat without care. Minutes stretched into half an hour as they searched every inch of her car. Clearly frustrated at finding nothing incriminating, Maya sat silently, observing their faces and memorizing details for her report later. Badge numbers, names from their uniforms, the time and location. Everything that would go into her complaint once the mission was complete. Finally, the first officer returned to the cruiser and opened the back door. His face was tight with barely contained anger. License comes back clean, he said, sounding almost disappointed. But something doesn't add up. What's a woman like you doing with a brand new sedan and designer clothes on a teacher's salary? The question was a trap designed to provoke. Maya gave a small smile. I save carefully, officer. And the clothes are good quality but not designer. May I go now? Not yet, he snapped. We're going to run a more thorough check. People like you are often involved in drug trafficking through this county. People like you. Again, the thinly veiled racism. Maya remained silent, knowing anything she said would be twisted against her. The radio in the cruiser crackled to life. The second officer was requesting additional information from dispatch, reading out her license number and asking for any warrants or flags. Maya listened carefully as the dispatcher responded. confirming her clean record. But then the dispatcher said something that made both officers pause. "Hold for additional information coming through." The silence that followed lasted nearly 2 minutes. Maya could see the confusion on the second officer's face as he held the radio, waiting. Finally, the dispatcher's voice returned, but now with a noticeably different tone. "Officers, you need to stand down immediately. Repeat, stand down. Captain Reynolds is en route to your location. Hold position and take no further action." The officers exchanged glances. The first officer's face darkened with anger and confusion. The second looked nervous, suddenly avoiding looking toward the cruiser where Maya sat. Within minutes, another police vehicle arrived, its lights flashing but siren silent. A tall, gray-haired man in a captain's uniform stepped out, his face grim. He conferred briefly with the two officers, his body language tense. The conversation was heated but too distant for Maya to hear clearly. The captain kept looking toward the cruiser where she sat, his expression shifting from anger to something like concern. After what seemed like an eternity, he approached, opened the door, and leaned in. "Ms. Davis," he said, his voice low and controlled. "There appears to have been a misunderstanding. I'm going to remove these handcuffs now." The captain helped her out of the cruiser and removed the handcuffs himself, his touch professional and impersonal, a stark contrast to the earlier officer's rough handling. "I apologize for the inconvenience," he said formally, loud enough for the other officers to hear. Then, much quieter, he added, "Someone from Washington called. We need to talk, but not here." Maya rubbed her wrists, maintaining her cover. "I don't understand what's happening, Captain. Why was I stopped and handcuffed? I've done nothing wrong." The captain's eyes darted to the other officers who were now standing by their cruiser, watching the interaction with undisguised curiosity. Officers Roberts and Wilson received a report of a suspicious vehicle in the area, the captain explained, his voice carrying for their benefit. "Unfortunately, they were overzealous in their response. I assure you this isn't how our department typically operates." Maya noticed how carefully he was choosing his words, aware of the potential legal repercussions of what had just occurred. "Your personal belongings will be returned immediately," he continued, gesturing to the second officer, who hurried to retrieve her phone and wallet from their cruiser. "You're free to go, Ms. Davis." The younger officer brought her belongings, avoiding eye contact as he handed them over. Maya checked her wallet, license, credit cards, and the small photo of her niece, actually her handler's daughter. Part of her cover story, all present. "Your vehicle hasn't been damaged," the captain assured her. "Again, I apologize for this incident. If you have any concerns, please feel free to contact me directly." He handed her a business card with his name and number. Maya studied the card. Captain Thomas Reynolds, Riverdale Police Department. The name wasn't familiar from her briefing materials. "Thank you, Captain," she said, slipping back into her teacher persona. "I'm just glad this misunderstanding has been resolved." As she walked back to her car, Maya could feel the officers watching her. The hostility from the first officer was palpable, while the younger one seemed embarrassed. The captain's expression was hardest to read, concern mixed with something like professional respect. Her car was a mess inside. The contents of her glove compartment scattered and her teaching materials jumbled. Maya took her time organizing the most visible items, using the moment to compose herself and process what had just happened. The police cruiser with the two officers pulled away first, leaving her alone with the captain. He approached her window again, his manner completely changed now that they were alone. "I received a call from a federal contact," he said quietly. "I don't know who you really are or what you're doing in my town, but I've been instructed to facilitate your work however necessary." He handed her another card, this one plain white with just a phone number. "This is my personal cell. Call if you have any issues with my officers again." Maya took the card, maintaining her cover despite the clear indication that someone had revealed her status. "I'm not sure what you mean, Captain. I'm just a teacher." He gave her a knowing look. "Of course you are. And I'd suggest you be more careful about your late-night drives. Ms. Davis, not all situations can be resolved with a phone call." With that, he returned to his vehicle and drove away, leaving Maya alone on the dark stretch of road. She sat in her car for several minutes, processing the implications. Someone in Washington had exposed her cover, at least partially. The local police captain now knew she was a federal agent of some kind. though perhaps not specifically CIA. It was a calculated risk from her superiors, compromise her cover slightly to prevent a potential disaster. If those officers had escalated the situation further, if they had taken her to the station, her entire mission could have been jeopardized. A thorough background check might have revealed inconsistencies in her cover story. Or worse, if news of her detention spread through the small town, it could have alerted her targets. Maya started her car and drove the remaining distance to her apartment, her mind racing. She would need to contact her handler immediately. This incident changed things. The racial profiling was bad enough, but now there was a security breach to address. As she parked at her apartment complex, Maya noticed her hands were shaking slightly. Not from fear of the officers. She had faced far more dangerous situations in her career. No, this was a different kind of reaction. A response to the humiliation and injustice of being treated as suspicious simply because of her skin color. It was a stark reminder that even with all her training, all her authority as a federal agent, she was still vulnerable to the same prejudices that affected civilians who looked like her. The weight of that reality settled heavily on her shoulders as she climbed the stairs to her apartment. Inside, with the door locked and the blinds drawn, Maya leaned against the wall and took her first deep, unguarded breath since the police lights had appeared in her mirror. Tomorrow she would have to deal with the fallout from this incident. But tonight, alone in her apartment, she allowed herself a moment to process the raw emotions beneath her professional exterior. Her mission had just become significantly more complicated. And somewhere in Washington, decisions were being made about her assignment that might change everything. Maya sat in the back of the police cruiser, her wrists aching from the too tight handcuffs. Through the window, she watched Officers Roberts and Wilson continue to search her car, their movements becoming increasingly frustrated as they found nothing suspicious. Roberts slammed the glove compartment shut with unnecessary force, his face tight with anger. The radio crackled again. "Unit 47, what's your status with that traffic stop?" Wilson grabbed the radio. "Still investigating, dispatch. Running the subject's information now." "Copy that. Be advised, Captain Reynolds is requesting details on your location and situation." The officers exchanged glances. "We're on County Road 16, mile marker 22, Wilson replied. "Subject detained for suspicious activity. Vehicle search in progress." There was a pause before the dispatcher responded. "Stand by." Maya used the moment to assess her situation. Her cover identity was solid. Maya Davis, 34, high school English teacher with a clean record and unremarkable background. Her apartment contained nothing that would reveal her true identity. All mission-critical materials were secured in specialized hiding spots or encrypted on devices that appeared to be ordinary household items. The only real concern was the timing. She'd just placed surveillance equipment at a location frequented by her targets. If this detention dragged on or resulted in further investigation, it could compromise weeks of careful work. The radio crackled to life again. "Unit 47, Captain Reynolds is requesting you cease all search activities immediately and await his arrival. Estimated time 3 minutes. Wilson's expression shifted to confusion. "Copy that, dispatch," he said, then turned to Roberts. "What the hell is this about?" Roberts scowled, looking back at Maya through the cruiser window. "Don't know, but I'm not done with her yet. Something's off about this whole situation." They continued their conversation in low voices, occasionally glancing her way. Maya remained still, her face carefully neutral despite the growing discomfort in her shoulders from the awkward position of her cuffed hands. She focused on controlling her breathing and observing every detail, skills that had saved her life more than once in the field. Headlights appeared down the road, growing brighter as another police vehicle approached. It pulled up behind the cruiser, its lights flashing but siren silent. Captain Reynolds emerged, his expression thunderous as he approached the two officers. "What the hell is going on here?" he demanded, his voice carrying clearly to where Maya sat. Robert straightened defensively. "Suspicious vehicle in a known drug trafficking area, sir." Driver was evasive when questioned. "Evasive how exactly?" Reynolds asked, his tone dangerous. "She claimed to be a teacher out late at night in this area. Doesn't add up." Reynolds glanced toward the cruiser, making brief eye contact with Maya before turning back to his officers. "And what probable cause did you have to initiate the stop?" The officers exchanged glances. "Vehicle matched a description from an anonymous tip," Wilson offered. "What description?" "What tip?" Reynolds pressed. Because dispatch has no record of any such tip coming in tonight. Roberts' face hardened. With respect, sir, we don't need to explain our policing decisions to— That's exactly what you need to do, Officer Roberts. Reynolds cut him off. Now step aside. I need to speak with the woman you've detained. As Reynolds approached the cruiser, Maya could see the other officers watching. Roberts with barely concealed anger and Wilson with growing uncertainty. The captain opened the door and crouched down to her level. Ms. Davis, he said formally, his voice carrying for the benefit of the other officers. I apologize for this situation. There appears to have been a serious error in judgment here. Then, lowering his voice to just above a whisper, he added, I received a call from someone very high up in the federal government. I don't know who you are or what you're doing in my town, but I've been instructed to ensure your operation proceeds without interference. Nod, if you understand. Maya gave a slight nod, maintaining her confused teacher expression for the benefit of the watching officers. Reynolds stood and addressed them. Release her immediately and return all her belongings. This detention ends now. Robert stepped forward, his posture confrontational. Sir, with all due respect, we haven't completed our investigation. There's something not right about— That wasn't a suggestion, officer. Reynolds cut him off, his voice like steel. It was an order. Release her now. Wilson moved first, retrieving the handcuff keys and approaching the cruiser. As he unlocked the cuffs, Maya noticed his hands were shaking slightly. Sorry about this, he muttered, barely audible. Rubbing her wrists, Maya stepped out of the cruiser, maintaining the appropriate level of confusion and indignation for her cover. Can someone please explain what's happening? Why was I stopped and handcuffed? Reynolds gave her a look that communicated she should play along. Ms. Davis, these officers received information that has proven to be inaccurate. You've done nothing wrong and you're free to go. Roberts wasn't backing down. Captain, we still have grounds at my office tomorrow, 8 a.m. sharp. Reynolds interrupted, his tone leaving no room for argument. Both of you. He turned back to Maya. Ms. Davis, is there anything missing from your vehicle or personal effects? Maya checked her belongings as they were returned by a sullen Wilson. Everything seems to be here, she confirmed, though she noted her car's interior had been thoroughly ransacked. I'd like to speak with Ms. Davis privately to explain the situation, Reynolds announced. You two can head back to the station. I'll file the incident report myself. The dismissal was clear. After a moment of tense silence, Roberts and Wilson returned to their cruiser. Roberts gave Maya one last hostile look before they drove away, leaving her alone with the captain. Once they were out of sight, Reynolds' demeanor changed subtly. Walk with me to your car, he said quietly. We shouldn't talk standing in the open. At her vehicle, Reynolds positioned himself so his back was to the road, shielding their conversation from any passing traffic. I don't know your real name or agency, he began without preamble, and I don't need to. But I received a call from someone identifying themselves as Deputy Director Phillips from a federal agency. He made it very clear that your presence in Riverdale is a matter of national security, and that you're to be allowed to continue your work without local interference. Maya maintained her cover. Captain, I really don't understand what's happening. I'm just a high school teacher. Reynolds gave her a knowing look. Of course you are. And I'm just a small-town police captain who happened to get a call from Washington, D.C. at 11:30 at night about a traffic stop that hadn't even been called in yet. He shook his head slightly. Look, I don't need to know the details, but those two officers have been problematic for some time. Roberts especially has had multiple complaints about racial profiling and excessive force. Are you saying I was pulled over because of my race? Maya asked, allowing a note of genuine anger to enter her voice. I'm saying it wouldn't be the first time, Reynolds replied grimly. And while I can't discuss ongoing internal investigations, I will tell you that Officer Roberts is already on thin ice. This incident won't help his case. He glanced back toward the road, then lowered his voice further. Whatever you're doing in my town, I hope it's important. Because I just put my career on the line by interfering with that stop without a clear departmental justification. If you're federal, you know how this works. The paperwork doesn't just disappear. Maya nodded slightly, acknowledging the risk he'd taken. I appreciate your assistance tonight, Captain. It was a misunderstanding that could have escalated unnecessarily. Here's what's going to happen, Reynolds said. All business now. I'm going to file a report stating that the stop was conducted without proper cause, that I personally intervened after being alerted to the situation by dispatch, and that the detained individual was released immediately once I arrived on scene. No names, no details about calls from Washington. He handed her a business card. This has my personal cell number on the back. If you have any further issues with my officers, call me directly, day or night. Maya took the card, studying it briefly before tucking it into her pocket. Thank you, Captain. One more thing, Reynolds added, his expression serious. Whatever you're investigating, be careful. Riverdale looks like a sleepy little town, but we have our share of dangerous elements, and not all of them wear badges. With that cryptic warning, he returned to his vehicle and drove away, leaving Maya alone by her car. She took a moment to collect herself, surveying the dark, empty road stretching in both directions. The encounter had been a close call, closer than she liked. Someone in Washington had made a significant decision tonight, partially compromising her cover to extract her from a potentially disastrous situation. Back in her apartment, Maya secured the door and performed her usual security sweep before pulling out her emergency communication device, a modified tablet hidden in the lining of her everyday laptop case. She needed to contact her handler immediately. The secure line connected after 3 rings. "This is Sparrow," came the familiar voice of Agent Diaz. "Mockingbird reporting," Maya responded using her mission code name. "We have a situation." She detailed the traffic stop, the officer's behavior, and Captain Reynolds' timely intervention. "Someone contacted the local police captain and identified me as a federal agent. My cover is partially compromised." There was a pause before Diaz responded. "That call came from the highest levels, Mockingbird. When your license was run, it triggered an alert in our system. Given the officer's behavior and the risks of further escalation, Deputy Director Phillips made the call to reach out to the local captain directly." "So Reynolds knows I'm federal but not specifically CIA?" "Correct. He was told you're part of an ongoing national security investigation, and that your cover needed to be maintained. No agency was specified." Diaz's voice became grave. "The incident report came across my desk immediately. Officers Roberts and Wilson have a history of racial profiling. 3 complaints in the last year alone, all involving people of color." Maya sighed, the weight of the night's events settling on her shoulders. "So I wasn't imagining it. They pulled me over because I'm black." "The timing and location made you a convenient target," Diaz confirmed. "But there's more. Officer Roberts is connected to one of your primary suspects, Thomas Reed. They served in the same military unit and maintain social ties. That's not in any of your briefing materials because we only discovered it yesterday." Maya processed this new information. "So my cover could have been blown if Roberts had decided to mention the stop to Reed." "Exactly. Which is why the deputy director made the call to intervene. Better to have the police captain know you're federal than to have your targets alerted to potential surveillance." "What about my mission parameters? Has anything changed?" "The core mission remains the same," Diaz assured her. "But we're adding resources. Agent Cho will be arriving tomorrow, posing as a substitute teacher. She'll serve as your backup if needed." Maya felt a flash of irritation. "I don't need a babysitter, Diaz." "This isn't about your capabilities, which are not in question," her handler replied firmly. "It's about mission security. Tonight demonstrated that you're operating in hostile territory, and not just from your targets. Having backup gives us options if things go sideways again." After ending the call, Maya sat in the darkness of her apartment, processing the implications of the night's events. The mission had become more complex, the risks heightened. Her cover was partially compromised, with the local police captain now aware of her federal status, and the revelation that Officer Roberts had connections to one of her primary targets added an entirely new dimension of danger. She moved to the window, peering through the blinds at the quiet street below. Somewhere in this town, a group of domestic terrorists was planning violence, and now at least one of them might have been alerted to a federal presence due to a racially motivated traffic stop. The irony wasn't lost on Maya. The very prejudice that had put her at risk tonight was connected to the extremist ideology she was here to investigate. It was a stark reminder that her mission wasn't just about preventing a terrorist attack. It was about confronting the dangerous ideologies that threatened the very fabric of American society. Morning arrived with gray skies and a light drizzle. Maya prepared for her day at Riverdale High with even more care than usual, knowing that Agent Cho would be arriving. Her cover as a substitute teacher was logical. Schools often needed last-minute replacements, but it would mean another person who knew her true identity. Another variable in an increasingly complicated equation. As she drove to work, Maya noticed a police cruiser parked near the school entrance. Captain Reynolds was leaning against it, appearing to casually observe the arriving students and staff. When he spotted her car, he gave a nearly imperceptible nod. Message received. He was keeping an eye on things, perhaps concerned about potential fallout from last night's incident. Maya parked in her usual spot and gathered her teaching materials, mentally shifting into her cover identity. For the next 7 hours, she would be Ms. Davis, dedicated English teacher, with no hint of the CIA operative beneath the surface. In the teacher's lounge, a bulletin board announced the arrival of a substitute, Ms. Cho, covering for the absent math teacher. Maya didn't react, continuing to prepare her coffee as if the news was of no particular interest. Her first class went smoothly. The students engaged in a discussion of Hemingway's The Old Man and the Sea. Maya moved through the lesson with practiced ease, though part of her mind remained focused on the wider mission. Would Officer Roberts contact Thomas Reed about last night's incident? Had Captain Reynolds managed to contain the situation? Would Agent Cho's arrival help or hinder her carefully constructed operation? During her planning period, Maya made her way to the math department, ostensibly to borrow a stapler. Agent Cho was at the desk, efficiently grading papers as if she'd been teaching for years. "Excuse me," Maya said from the doorway. "I'm Maya Davis, English department. Mind if I borrow your stapler? Ours seems to have vanished." Cho looked up with a pleasant, professional smile. To anyone watching, they were simply colleagues meeting for the first time. "Of course," she replied, handing over the stapler. "I'm Lin Cho, just filling in for Mr. Peterson this week." Their eyes met briefly, a silent exchange of recognition. In that moment, Maya knew that despite her initial resistance to having backup, she was grateful for the presence of another agent. The events of the previous night had shaken her more than she wanted to admit, a reminder that even the most experienced operatives were vulnerable when isolated. "Thanks," Maya said, taking the stapler. "If you need anything or have any questions about the school, my classroom is 114. "I appreciate that," Cho replied with a nod. "I might take you up on it later." As Maya left the classroom, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. The mission had become more dangerous, the stakes higher, but she wasn't alone anymore. And sometimes, in the world of deep cover operations, that made all the difference. The school day continued without incident, but Maya remained hypervigilant, aware that the delicate balance of her mission had shifted. Tonight, she would meet with Agent Cho to coordinate their approach going forward. Tomorrow, she would continue her surveillance of the terrorist cell, and somewhere in Riverdale, Officer Roberts was reporting for his disciplinary meeting with Captain Reynolds, potentially harboring resentment against the black teacher who had somehow earned the protection of his superior. Whether that resentment would translate into further interference with her mission remained to be seen. As Maya dismissed her final class of the day, she reflected on how quickly circumstances could change in the field. 24 hours ago, she had been a lone operative making steady progress on her assignment. Now she was navigating a complex web of local law enforcement politics, racial tension, and heightened security concerns. But adaptability was what made her one of the agency's top operatives. And if there was one thing Maya Reynolds knew how to do, it was adapt and overcome. Whatever challenges lay ahead, from racist police officers to domestic terrorists, she would face them with the skill and determination that had defined her career. The confrontation on that dark road had changed the parameters of her mission, but not its importance. If anything, it had reinforced why she was here, to protect a country that, for all its flaws and injustices, was still worth fighting for. The morning after the incident, Maya woke before her alarm. She'd barely slept, her mind replaying the events of the previous night. The flash of police lights, the harsh voices, the cold metal of handcuffs biting into her wrists. These weren't new experiences. Field operatives often faced dangerous situations, but the nature of this confrontation felt different, more personal. She made coffee and secured her apartment before calling her handler on the encrypted line. Agent Diaz answered immediately. "I need a secure time to debrief about last night," Maya said without preamble. 800 hours. "Use Protocol 7, Diaz replied. His voice was tense. "The deputy director will be on the call." Maya's stomach tightened. The involvement of such high-level leadership suggested the incident had created serious ripples back at Langley. At precisely 8 a.m., Maya connected through her secure tablet. After a series of authentication measures, 3 faces appeared on the encrypted video call: Agent Diaz, Deputy Director Phillips, and a woman Maya didn't recognize. "Agent Reynolds," Phillips began, his gray eyebrows drawn together in concern. "Before we discuss the operational implications, are you all right?" The question surprised her. In her 12 years with the agency, welfare checks were rarely the first order of business. "I'm operational, sir," she replied automatically. "That's not what I asked," Phillips pressed, his voice gentler than she'd ever heard it. Maya paused, recalibrating. "Physically, I'm fine. The handcuffs were unnecessarily tight, but no lasting damage. Mentally," she hesitated. "I've experienced racial profiling before. It's nothing new." Phillips nodded grimly. "I want to introduce Chief Counsel Elena Vasquez," he said, gesturing to the unfamiliar woman. "She's here because what happened last night wasn't just a potential compromise of your cover. It was a violation of your civil rights." The woman nodded professionally. "Agent Reynolds, I've reviewed the preliminary report and the body camera footage we've obtained. What those officers did was clearly inappropriate and potentially illegal. We're taking this very seriously." Maya's mind raced through the implications. Body camera footage? "Captain Reynolds secured it immediately," Diaz explained. He was concerned the officers might attempt to delete or alter it. "The local captain has proven to be a valuable ally," Phillips added. "His actions last night prevented a serious escalation." Maya nodded, thinking of the captain's quiet efficiency and the respectful way he'd handled the situation. "He seemed to understand the stakes without needing details. He's a 20-year veteran with a background in joint task forces," Diaz explained. "He recognized a federal operation when he saw one. Even without specifics. Now," Phillips leaned forward, his expression grave, "we need to discuss how this affects your mission." For the next 40 minutes, they dissected the operational impact. The fact that Captain Reynolds now knew she was federal but not specifically CIA. The connection between Officer Roberts and one of her primary targets. The risk that her cover might be compromised if Roberts mentioned the incident to his friend in the terrorist cell. "We have 3 options," Phillips concluded. "First, extract you immediately and send in a new operative. Second, maintain your cover but add support personnel. Third, pivot to a new approach entirely." Maya considered these alternatives carefully. Extraction would mean months of wasted work. A complete pivot might miss crucial intelligence she'd already gathered. "But additional support, I recommend the second option," she said finally. "My cover as a teacher is solid. The students and faculty trust me. I've made significant inroads with surveillance. Abandoning that progress would set us back considerably." Phillips nodded. "Agent Cho is already en route. She'll arrive this afternoon, posing as a substitute teacher. Agent Harrison will follow tomorrow as a school maintenance contractor." "With respect, sir," Maya said carefully. "Adding too many new faces at once might draw attention." "Agreed," Phillips replied. "Cho will be your direct backup. Harrison will operate peripherally, handling technical surveillance so you can focus on human intelligence." The meeting concluded with a discussion of security protocols and communication schedules. As Maya prepared to disconnect, Phillips added one final note. "Agent Reynolds, this incident has raised concerns about officer conduct in Riverdale. Captain Reynolds has initiated an internal investigation into Officers Roberts and Wilson. The Department of Justice has been notified as well." Maya processed this information. "Will that create additional complications for the mission?" "Possibly," Phillips acknowledged. "But we can't ignore what happened. Those officers didn't just risk compromising a federal operation, they violated the law. There are principles at stake beyond this single mission." After the call ended, Maya sat still for several minutes, absorbing the implications. The incident had escalated beyond her control, involving not just CIA leadership but potentially the Department of Justice. What had begun as a straightforward counter-terrorism operation was now entangled with issues of racial profiling, police misconduct, and civil rights violations. She showered and dressed for work, carefully maintaining her teacher persona. Ms. Davis would be concerned about her students' progress on their essays, not about domestic terrorists or racist police officers. The compartmentalization that had served Maya throughout her career was more essential than ever. At Riverdale High, the day proceeded with superficial normalcy. Maya taught her classes, attended a faculty meeting, and maintained her cover flawlessly. But beneath this routine, she noticed subtle changes. A new security guard at the main entrance. Captain Reynolds's cruiser driving slowly past the school during lunch period. Small adjustments that indicated the invisible machinery of federal intervention was already in motion. During her planning period, Maya received a text from an unknown number. Meeting your friend for coffee at Mel's 4:30. Agent Cho had arrived. After school, Maya drove to the diner, taking a circuitous route to ensure she wasn't followed. Mel's was busier than usual, the after-school crowd filling booths with teenagers and their milkshakes. In a corner booth, a young Asian woman sat alone reading a paperback novel. Agent Cho's cover was impeccable. Everything from her casual posture to her slightly worn messenger bag suggested substitute teacher rather than elite CIA operative. Maya ordered coffee at the counter before sliding into the booth across from Cho. Good book? She asked casually. Cho glanced up with a friendly smile that revealed nothing of their true connection. Just something to pass the time. You're Ms. Davis, right? From the English department? That's right. Lynn, isn't it? How was your first day with our math students? They maintained this cover conversation for several minutes. Their words meaningless, but their eyes communicating volumes. Both women were skilled enough to conduct their real exchange silently, through subtle gestures and expressions invisible to ordinary observers. When the diner quieted, Cho leaned forward slightly. I've been briefed on your situation, she said, her voice just above a whisper. Harrison will handle the technical aspects starting tomorrow. I'll be your direct contact, Maya nodded, stirring her coffee. The police situation complicates things. It does, Cho agreed. But it also creates opportunities. Captain Reynolds has agreed to provide limited information about his officers' connections to your targets. Nothing that would compromise his position, but enough to give us additional insight. And the two officers? Roberts has been placed on administrative leave pending investigation. Wilson remains on duty but has been reassigned to desk work. Cho's expression hardened slightly. Roberts isn't taking it well. He's been vocal about his resentment, claiming discrimination and unfair treatment. Maya absorbed this news with growing concern. If he's angry and has connections to our target— Exactly, Cho confirmed. He could become either a liability or an unwitting source of intelligence. We'll need to monitor him carefully. They finished their coffee and parted ways, maintaining their cover as casual acquaintances. As Maya drove home, she considered the rapidly evolving situation. The mission had grown from tracking a domestic terrorist cell to navigating a complex web involving local law enforcement, internal investigations, and multiple federal agents. At her apartment, Maya updated her security measures before reviewing her intelligence on the terrorist cell. Their next meeting was scheduled for tomorrow night at the abandoned warehouse outside town. With Harrison handling technical surveillance, she could focus on direct observation, assuming her cover remained intact. Her phone buzzed with a text from Captain Reynolds. Need to speak with you. Private matter. Can you meet? 20 minutes later, Maya sat in the captain's unmarked vehicle in the empty parking lot of a closed supermarket. The location was public enough to be safe but isolated enough for confidential conversation. Thank you for coming, Reynolds began, his expression grim. There's been a development you should know about. He handed her a printout of a text message exchange. These are from Robert's phone. We obtained them legally through the internal investigation. Maya scanned the messages, her heart sinking. Roberts had indeed contacted his friend Thomas Reed, mentioning a suspicious black woman teacher who had friends in high places. No names were included, but the implication was clear enough. How widely has this spread? She asked, her mind already calculating contingencies. Hard to say, Reynolds admitted. Reed doesn't appear to have responded to the text. But he's part of your area of interest, correct? Maya neither confirmed nor denied maintaining operational security despite their tentative alliance. Reynolds understood her silence. I've done what I can to contain this, but you should know that Roberts is becoming increasingly volatile. He's convinced he's being targeted unfairly and sees you as the cause of his problems. Has he made any threats? Nothing explicit. but he has a history of anger management issues and owns several firearms. Reynolds looked at her directly. I don't need to know exactly what you're doing in my town, but if it involves Reed and his associates, you should be aware that they might now be aware of you. Maya thanked him for the warning and returned to her apartment, her mind racing through scenarios and countermeasures. She contacted Diaz immediately, updating him on this new development. This changes our approach, Diaz said after a moment of consideration. We can't assume your cover remains intact. From now on, operate under the assumption that you've been compromised. Should we abort? Maya asked, though she already knew she didn't want to. Not yet, but we're accelerating the timeline. Harrison will arrive tonight, not tomorrow. The surveillance operation at the warehouse is now priority 1. If we can obtain actionable intelligence about the cell's plans, we can move to the arrest phase ahead of schedule. The next morning brought another complication. As Maya arrived at school, she noticed students gathered in small groups, whispering and glancing her way. In her first period class, the atmosphere was tense, the usual casual chatter replaced by awkward silence. During her planning period, a colleague from the history department stopped by her classroom. Just wanted to check if you're okay, he said, his discomfort evident. There are some strange rumors going around. What kind of rumors? Maya asked, though she suspected the answer. Some parents are saying you're not really a teacher, that you're some kind of federal agent or something. He laughed nervously. Crazy, right? Small towns and their conspiracy theories. Maya forced a smile. That's ridiculous. Though I'm flattered they think my life is that exciting. But as the day progressed, it became clear the rumors were spreading rapidly. By lunchtime, even her students were asking oblique questions about her background and previous teaching positions. The small-town grapevine was in full effect, and her cover was unraveling by the hour. After school, Maya met with Cho and the newly arrived Harrison in a secure location outside town. Harrison was a stocky man with thinning hair and the unassuming demeanor of someone professionally trained to be forgettable. The warehouse surveillance is ready, he reported. We have audio and visual coverage of all entrance points and the main interior space. If they meet there tonight as expected, we'll capture everything. And if my cover is blown? Maya asked bluntly. Cho and Harrison exchanged glances. We have a contingency extraction plan, Cho said carefully. But ideally we complete the surveillance operation first. This might be our only chance to gather concrete evidence of their plans. Maya nodded, accepting the calculated risk. They finalized the details for that night's operation, each taking specific responsibilities. Despite the complications, there was comfort in working with a team again after weeks of solo operation. As dusk fell, Maya prepared for what might be the most crucial night of her mission. She dressed in dark clothing that would allow her to blend into the shadows around the warehouse. Her agency-issued sidearm, concealed until now, was secured in a shoulder holster. If her cover was truly compromised, there was no longer any need to maintain the unarmed teacher persona. Her phone buzzed with an urgent text from Captain Reynolds. Roberts missing. Weapon unaccounted for. Be careful. The warning sent a chill through her. Officer Roberts, angry and potentially armed, had disappeared just as she was preparing for a critical surveillance operation. The timing couldn't be coincidence. Maya contacted her team immediately. We have a potential security threat. Roberts is unaccounted for and possibly armed. Should we abort? Harrison asked over the secure line. Maya considered their options. Aborting meant losing perhaps their only opportunity to gather critical intelligence about the terrorist cell's plans. Proceeding meant potential danger if Roberts had indeed connected her to tonight's operation. We proceed, she decided firmly, but with enhanced security protocols. Harrison, maintain your position with the technical surveillance. Cho, I want you as my direct backup, and alert the tactical team to be ready for rapid deployment if necessary. As she drove toward the warehouse, Maya reflected on how drastically the situation had evolved in just 48 hours. What began as a routine undercover assignment had transformed into a volatile operation with multiple threat vectors. Not just from the terrorist cell she'd been sent to investigate, but from a rogue police officer with personal grievances and potential connections to her targets. The handcuffs that had been placed on her wrists that night hadn't just been a momentary indignity. They had set in motion a chain of events that threatened both her mission and her safety. The intersection of racial profiling and counterterrorism operations had created a dangerous new dynamic, one that neither her training nor her experience had fully prepared her for. But as she parked her vehicle in the concealed location half a mile from the warehouse, Maya felt a familiar clarity descend. The complications and emotions fell away, leaving only the mission. Whatever challenges lay ahead, from racist police, officers to domestic terrorists, she would face them with the skill and determination that had defined her career. The night ahead would either provide the breakthrough they needed to prevent a domestic terror attack or force a premature end to her mission. Either way, Maya Reynolds was prepared to do whatever necessary to complete her assignment and return home safely. What she couldn't know, as she moved silently through the darkness toward her observation point, was that Officer Roberts had already reached the warehouse, and he wasn't alone. The abandoned warehouse loomed against the night sky, its broken windows like dark eyes watching the surrounding countryside. Maya moved silently through the tall grass, staying low and using the terrain for cover. In her earpiece, Agent Cho's steady breathing provided a reassuring rhythm. 2 vehicles at the north entrance, Cho whispered through their comms. 4 more approaching from the east access road. Maya checked her watch. 9:47 p.m. The terrorist cell's meeting was scheduled for 10. They were arriving early, never a good sign in her experience. Harrison's status on surveillance? She asked quietly. All systems operational, came the technician's calm reply. Audio and video feeds are live. Thermal imaging shows 14 heat signatures already inside the main space. 14. More than their intelligence had indicated. Maya recalculated, adjusting her mental map of the operation. If there were already 14 people inside, plus more arriving. Team leader, this is Mockingbird, she said, using her operation call sign to address the tactical team commander waiting 5 miles away. We have more subjects than anticipated. Possible escalation in progress. Maintain readiness for rapid response. Copy that, Mockingbird. Tactical team standing by. Maya reached her observation point, a small rise that offered a clear view of the warehouse's main entrance while providing adequate cover. Through her night vision binoculars, she could see men unloading crates from the recently arrived vehicles. The practiced efficiency of their movement suggested military training. Harrison, can you get audio on those crates? She asked, a moment of silence then. Partial audio only. They're discussing delivery schedules and distribution points. One mentioned that everything needs to be in position by Tuesday. Tuesday, 3 days away. Whatever they were planning was imminent. As Maya zoomed in on the group, a familiar figure caught her attention. The distinctive build and swagger were unmistakable even in the green glow of night vision. I have visual confirmation on Officer Roberts, she reported, her voice tightening. He appears to be actively participating, not just observing. Can you determine his role? Diaz asked, having joined the operation remotely from Langley. Maya observed for several moments. He's deferring to Reed but seems to be providing information. His body language suggests he's trying to prove his value to the group. A disturbing theory formed in her mind. Diaz, I think Roberts may have approached them after being placed on leave. He's using knowledge of my presence as currency. That tracks with his phone records, Diaz confirmed. He made multiple calls to Reed immediately after his suspension. Inside the warehouse, the meeting was beginning. Through Harrison's surveillance feeds, they could hear fragments of conversation, enough to piece together a chilling picture. The group was planning coordinated attacks on 3 government buildings in the state capital, timed to coincide with a controversial legislative session on Tuesday. We have sufficient probable cause for intervention, the tactical team leader announced. Request permission to move in. Maya was about to agree when she noticed new movement at the warehouse entrance. A smaller figure, female based on the silhouette, was being escorted inside. Something about the woman's reluctant gait sent warning bells ringing through Maya's mind. Hold position, she ordered sharply. We have a potential hostage situation developing. She adjusted her binoculars, trying to get a clearer view of the woman. The angle was wrong, the distance too great. Harrison, can you get visual on the female subject who just entered? After a moment, Harrison's voice came through, tight with concern. It's Agent Cho. Maya's blood ran cold. That's impossible. Cho is... She turned to where her backup should have been positioned, only to find empty space. Mockingbird, I've lost contact with Sparrow, Diaz reported, using Cho's call sign. Last transmission was approximately 3 minutes ago. Maya processed this development with the rapid calculation of a veteran field operative. Somehow Cho had been compromised and captured. The timing suggested an ambush, which meant All units assume operation security is compromised, she ordered. Maintain positions but prepare for immediate action on my signal. Through the surveillance feed, they could now hear what was happening inside. Thomas Reed's voice was clear, triumphant, thanks to Officer Roberts.
We not only know about the federal agent who's been watching us,
but we've captured one of her colleagues. A murmur of appreciation spread through the group. Now we can send a very clear message about what happens to those who interfere with our plans. Maya could hear Cho's voice now, calm despite the danger, giving nothing away. You're making a mistake. I'm just a substitute teacher. Save it, Roberts interrupted. We know you're federal. The question is, are you willing to tell us what you know about our operation, or do we need to use more persuasive methods? Maya had heard enough. The situation had deteriorated beyond intelligence gathering. Cho's life was in immediate danger, and the group's plans were clear enough to justify intervention. All units execute Takedown Plan Delta, she ordered. Priority is securing the hostage and containing all suspects. Be advised, suspects are likely armed and have demonstrated willingness to engage in violence. The tactical team acknowledged, beginning their rapid approach to the warehouse. Maya drew her sidearm and moved quickly toward the building's southern entrance, the extraction point designated in their emergency protocols. Harrison, guide me to Cho's location, she instructed. Thermal imaging shows her near the northwest corner, Harrison replied. 2 armed subjects in close proximity. Approach from the west corridor for minimal exposure. Maya reached the warehouse's exterior wall, pressing herself against the weathered metal as she edged toward a rusted side door. The tactical team would be hitting the main entrance in approximately 90 seconds, creating the distraction she needed to reach Cho. The door yielded to her careful pressure, opening with minimal noise. Inside, the warehouse was dimly lit by portable work lights, creating pools of harsh brightness surrounded by deep shadows. Perfect for her purposes. Maya moved silently through the western corridor, the concrete floor cold beneath her boots. Ahead, she could hear Reed continuing his speech, his voice rising with fervor as he detailed their righteous mission against the government. 30 seconds to tactical breach, came the team, leader's whisper in her ear. Maya positioned herself at the corner of the corridor, peering carefully into the main space. She could see Cho now seated on a metal chair, her hands bound behind her back. Robert stood beside her, a handgun held casually at his side. Reed paced in front of them, gesturing to the assembled group. The crates Maya had seen earlier were open now, revealing their contents: assault rifles, explosives, and what appeared to be homemade detonators. The evidence was irrefutable. 10 seconds, the tactical leader counted down. Maya took a deep breath, centering herself for what would come next. 5, 4. She caught Cho's eye across the warehouse floor. A nearly imperceptible nod passed between them. 3, 2. Federal agents. The shout came simultaneously, with the crash of the tactical team breaching the main doors. Flashbang grenades detonated, filling the space with blinding light and disorienting sound. In the chaos, Maya moved. 3 quick steps took her from the corridor into the main space. Roberts was turning, raising his weapon in confusion as the tactical team stormed in from the opposite side. Maya's focus narrowed to a singular purpose: reaching Cho before Roberts could use her as leverage. "Drop your weapon," she shouted, her gun trained on Roberts. For a moment, their eyes met across the chaotic warehouse. Recognition dawned on his face. The suspicious teacher he'd handcuffed on a dark road was now revealing her true identity. Roberts made his choice. He swung his weapon toward Maya, hatred contorting his features. She fired first, one clean shot to his shoulder, causing his arm to drop uselessly to his side, his weapon clattering to the floor. As he fell, Cho kicked out with her bound legs, knocking him completely off balance. Around them, the tactical team was securing the other members of the group with practiced efficiency. Reed attempted to flee toward a rear exit, but was quickly intercepted and forced to the ground. Maya reached Cho, quickly cutting through her restraints with a pocket knife. "Are you hurt?" "Nothing serious," Cho replied, rubbing her wrists. "They ambushed me at my observation point. Roberts recognized me from the school. Within minutes, the warehouse was secured. 17 suspects in custody, including Reed and Roberts. The weapons cache documented and contained. Harrison arrived with additional agents to process the scene and evidence. Maya stood outside, watching as the suspects were loaded into transport vehicles. Captain Reynolds arrived, his expression grim as he observed Roberts being treated by a medic before being placed under arrest. "I should have seen it earlier," Reynolds said as he approached. "Maya, Roberts wasn't just racially profiling suspects, he was actively working with extremists. Sometimes the threats are hiding in plain sight," Maya replied. "Even for professionals." Reynolds nodded thoughtfully. "Your cover is completely blown now. What happens next?" "I'll be debriefed and reassigned," she said simply. "Another agent will likely follow up on any remaining threads from this case." "And the officer who started all this by racially profiling you?" Maya looked at Roberts as he was placed in a separate vehicle, his shoulder bandaged. His future now involving federal terrorism charges in addition to civil rights violations. "He'll face justice on multiple fronts," she said, "as will everyone involved in this plot." 2 days later, Maya sat in Deputy Director Phillips's office at CIA headquarters, her mission officially complete. The domestic terrorism cell had been dismantled, their attack prevented. The evidence gathered during the operation was overwhelming, ensuring successful prosecutions. "The Attorney General wanted me to personally convey her appreciation," Phillips said, sliding a formal letter across his desk. "Your work prevented what could have been a devastating attack." Maya accepted the letter with a nod. "And the civil rights investigation?" "Proceeding at the highest levels," Phillips confirmed. "Officer Roberts' actions that night, pulling you over without cause, the racial profiling, the excessive force, have become central to a broader Department of Justice investigation into the Riverdale Police Department. Captain Reynolds is cooperating fully." "Good," Maya said simply. Phillips studied her for a moment. "You know, when we selected you for this assignment, we considered many factors: your experience, your skills, your previous success in deep cover operations. We didn't anticipate that your race would become a critical factor in both the greatest threat to the mission and ultimately its success." Maya met his gaze steadily. "With respect, sir, I did. It's a reality I've navigated my entire life, not just during this assignment." Phillips had the grace to look slightly uncomfortable. "Point taken, Agent Reynolds." He cleared his throat. "The review board has recommended you for commendation. Your actions under extreme pressure were exemplary." "Thank you, sir." "And Agent Cho? Also being commended. Her quick thinking when captured helped prevent the situation from escalating further." Phillips shuffled some papers on his desk. "I understand you've requested a week's leave before your next assignment." "Yes, sir. I'd like to visit my grandmother in Georgia." Our conversation was interrupted by this mission. Phillips nodded. "Of course. Take 2 weeks if you need it. You've earned the rest." He hesitated, then added, "The events in Riverdale have prompted some internal discussions about our protocols for agents of color, working undercover in areas with known racial tensions. Your experience is informing those conversations." Maya absorbed this information with mixed feelings. On one hand, it was progress that the agency was acknowledging these realities. On the other, it had taken a near disaster to prompt the discussion. "I'd be willing to contribute to those conversations when I return, sir." "We were hoping you'd say that," Phillips replied. "Your perspective would be invaluable." As Maya left headquarters that evening, she reflected on the complexities of her profession and her identity. The mission in Riverdale had been successful by objective standards. Terrorist plot foiled, perpetrators arrested, lives saved. But it had also exposed uncomfortable truths about America that many preferred to ignore. 1 month later, Maya testified at a closed Senate Intelligence Committee, hearing about domestic terrorism threats. While most of her testimony focused on the operational details of the Riverdale case, she also spoke candidly about how racial profiling had nearly compromised a critical national security mission. "The incident highlights a troubling reality," she told the committee members. "When law enforcement officers act on racial bias rather than legitimate suspicion, they don't just violate civil rights, they can actively damage our security operations and put American lives at risk." Her testimony, though confidential, had impact. New training protocols were developed for both local police departments and federal agencies. Captain Reynolds was promoted and tasked with implementing reforms in his department. Officer Roberts and his co-conspirators received lengthy sentences for their planned attack and other crimes. As for Maya Reynolds, she continued her work as one of the CIA's most effective operatives. But she also became an important voice within the agency, advocating for better understanding of how race, bias, and security intersected in their operations around the world. The handcuffs that had been placed on her wrists that night in Riverdale hadn't just been an injustice. They had been a wake-up call, one that ultimately made both Maya and the institutions she served stronger, more aware and better equipped to protect all Americans, regardless of their color. When asked later about the Riverdale operation, Maya would simply say, "Sometimes our greatest challenges reveal our most important truths." It was a lesson she carried with her into every subsequent mission, a hard-won wisdom that made her not just a better agent, but a more effective force for change in a country still struggling to live up to its highest ideals.